So today we're going to be talking about dysplasia. Okay, so by the end of this video, you will understand several key concepts. One, you should have a firm understanding of what dysplasia is. That also incorporates its definition and also its correlations. We're going to go ahead and bring in some high-yield examples, some pathological manifestations of dysplasia. You'll notice in these videos we focus on very high-yield material, specifically for USMLE, but also for just general understanding, while tailored for medical students, however. Additionally, we're going to have some clinical relevance, and we'll throw in some USMLE practice questions, specifically so that you can not only test your knowledge, but more importantly, solidify your understanding for the long term, okay? So let's go ahead and begin. So dysplasia, disordered cellular growth. What does dysplasia mean? So to start, it's easy if we just start with the definition. So dysplasia refers to abnormal, disorganized cellular growth, which is often a precursor to cancer. It's very important that you recognize that dysplasia is a precursor for cancer. One way I like to think about dysplasia is basically like a construction site gone wrong, where the framework of the buildings, which could represent your cells, the framework is irregular and basically unstable. Because it's unstable, it increases the risk for collapse in the house, which in this can be referred to the progression of cancer. If you don't fix the problem quick, it's going to be very bad. The house is going to collapse. Dysplasia is a step beyond hyperplasia or metaplasia in the progression towards malignancy. So it's the final step before cancer starts to happen. Dys means abnormal or difficult. Plasia refers to formation or growth. So it literally means abnormal growth. So it's bad. Key features to keep in mind with dysplasia. Number one of the most important things you're going to start to see with dysplasia is disordered architecture. I know this says disorders, but it should say disordered. So disordered architecture. This basically means a loss of normal tissue organization, such as disruption of normal epithelial layers, all right? Number two, which is also very high yield, is cellular changes. What do I mean by cellular changes? Well, it can be broken out into two other subtopics. Number one is pleomorphism. That basically means that there's variety in cell size and also in cell shape, all right? You'll also see nuclear abnormalities. Basically, you're going to see hyperchromasia, which is darkly stained nuclei due to increased DNA content. You'll also see an increased nuclear to cytoplasmic, or NC ratio. This basically means that there's an enlarged nuclei compared to the cytoplasm. And you're also going to see abnormal mitotic figures, atypical mitosis indicating increased and abnormal cell proliferation. All right. Additionally, another very high yield concept, dysplasia is reversible. Dysplasia is reversible, okay? So if the indicating stimulus is removed, so you need to remove whatever is causing the dysplasia needs to be removed. So an example of this could be chronic smoking, all right? Or chronic inflammation due to some sort of external object. If you remove the smoking, if you remove that's creating the problem, dysplasia will go back to regular patterns, okay? Additionally, another very high yield topic is its lack of invasion. What do I mean by lack of invasion? So dysplastic cells are confined to the epithelium. They do not invade the basement membrane, okay? So once invasion occurs, once this step is no longer here, it is very bad. It is actually classified as a carcinoma, okay? So additionally, some other high yield things we can do for you here is go through some examples of dysplasia. So number one, oral leukoplakia. Oral leukoplakia are white plaques on the oral mucosa due to chronic irritation. A classic example of this is tobacco smoke. Tobacco use in general is considered dysplastic and carries a risk of progression to squamous cell carcinoma. Looking for the white plaques is an indication of dysplasia. Okay. Additionally, another high yield topic that's often brought up is actinic keratosis, which is dysplastic changes in sun-damaged skin that may progress to squamous cell carcinoma. Again, a lot of these examples we're bringing up right now are just to plant seeds in your brain. As we continue to move on throughout this lecture series, we're going to continue to dive deep into all of these diseases, but it's very important that you have a basic understanding because these will come up time and time again throughout your process as a student preparing for USMLE. Okay. Another one that you'll see is laryngeal dysplasia. This is also associated with smoking and also alcohol use. This can progress to laryngeal squamous cell carcinoma. All right. And lastly, another one that's very high yield is inflammatory bowel disease. An example of inflammatory bowel disease could be ulcerative colitis. So chronic inflammation can lead to colonic dysplasia, a precursor to colorectal adenocarcinoma. And also dysplasia is reversible if the stress is removed. However, if any of the stress persists with these examples, you will progress to cancer eventually. So one way you can think about dysplasia is like a chaotic neighborhood, all right? So I want you to imagine a peaceful neighborhood where all the houses are neatly arranged, just like a normal tissue. Over time, if you have, some boogeyman come in and starts vandalizing all the houses, painting the walls in strange colors and ignoring the usual building codes, for example, the neighborhood will begin to look messy and disorganized. This is very similar to dysplasia. So dysplasia can also be broken down into 4 different types of dysplasia, and we'll also relate this to our chaotic neighborhood example. So first, mild dysplasia could be referred to as a few houses on the block are messy. The boogeyman came and only vandalized a couple houses, but if we can just get the guy out of there, then the homeowners can fix them. Second is moderate dysplasia. Now let's say that half the neighborhood has been disorganized by the boogeyman. Well, with more houses showing poor structure and random construction, it's going to be even harder for the homeowners to get their houses back and their neighborhood back into regular shape. Next, we can even go even further with severe dysplasia, which is where like most of the neighborhood, 90% of the neighborhood is just completely chaotic. Boogeyman recruited all of his homies and they've just destroyed majority of the neighborhood. It is a complete mess, but it is still limited to the area. If we can just get him out of there, we can make it be okay. So it does not invade other neighborhoods at this point. No basement membrane invasion yet. However, if this guy got his entire crew and they just started taking over the whole city, this can be thought of as invasive carcinoma. This is where the chaos spreads beyond just the neighborhood, but with the entire city now involved, making it extremely difficult and also hard to locate where they are at. All right. So that's just an example that might help you understand dysplasia a little bit better. Some clinical correlations we're going to jump into now. These are all very high yield. So first, cervical intraepithelial neoplasia, CIN. I know this is a big word, but if we look at the word cervical, so it involves the cervix, it's intraepithelial, so it's inside the epithelial, neoplasia, new growth. So like I said before, we will continue to dive deep, but I am just starting to plant seeds right now. So let's just think about this. Let's talk about CIN or cervical intraepithelial neoplasia a little bit. So CIN represents abnormal growth of cervical epithelium. How does this happen? Well, it is typically a result of persistent infection with high risk HPV, especially what strains? HPV 16 and 18 are very high risk. This is very high yield. 16 and 18 are commonly associated as a higher risk. What are the less common threats? Well, 31, 33, 45, 52, and also 50, 58. However, these high-risk HPV types produce oncoproteins, meaning they are cancer-forming, for example, E6, E7, that inactivate tumor suppressor genes such as P53 and RB. This leads to uncontrolled cell division and dysplasia. Key mechanisms: progression from normal cervical epithelium to dysplasia. All right, this will eventually lead to invasive carcinoma. CIN is classified into 3 grades, CIN 1, 2, and 3, where CIN 3 is the most severe and a precursor to invasive cervical carcinoma. So key takeaways, basically persistent HPV infection, specifically 16 and 18, and E6 and E7 inhibits your tumor suppressor hormones like P53 and RB. If they are inhibited, they will promote cancer. And early detection is extremely imperative through a pap smear and HPV testing, for example. Another very high yield example that I will bring up over and over and over again, because I guarantee you'll be tested on it, is Barrett's esophagus. So what is Barrett's esophagus? It occurs to long-standing gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD. Okay, so chronic acid reflux that comes up basically damages the esophagus squamous epithelium, which then is replaced by columnar epithelium, which could be classified as a type of metaplasia. This change is the body's attempt to protect itself from the acidic environment. So key mechanisms, so the squamous epithelium is replaced with columnar epithelium, known as metaplasia, due to prolonged exposure to stomach acid. If this stress continues, it will lead to dysplasia and progressively progress into adenocarcinoma of the esophagus. So key takeaways with GERD is the major cause of metaplasia, and ongoing injury can lead to dysplasia and esophageal adenocarcinoma. This is a precursor lesion for cancer. All right, so chronic acid reflux, GERD to metaplasia, squamous to columnar. Adenocarcinoma of the esophagus is the end stage progression, meaning you don't get rid of the acid, it progresses to adenocarcinoma. Risk factors, think about it. Usually a person that's having problems with eating too much, like obesity, is very, very common with Barrett's esophagus. If you have somebody who weighs a lot, or you can tell has lived a very sedentary lifestyle, obesity and Barrett's esophagus should be at the top of your list, and also smoking. Screening is with an endoscopy and biopsy for dysplasia to help with early detection. Lastly, we're going to talk about endometrial hyperplasia. Okay, endometrial hyperplasia is caused by chronic, unopposed estrogen stimulation. I will continue to bring these up again and again and again. Where estrogen is not balanced by progesterone, so there's an influx of estrogen not balanced by progesterone. Conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, obesity, and estrogen therapy without progesterone can lead to excessive endometrial growth. This can result in an abnormal thickening of the endometrial lining. Key mechanisms: persistent unopposed estrogen causes the endometrial lining to proliferate excessively. This hyperplasia can progress to dysplasia and over time lead to endometrial carcinoma. Key takeaways: remember, unopposed estrogen. This leads to endometrial hyperplasia, increasing the risk for endometrial cancer. The key points: PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, obesity, and estrogen therapy are common causes. The way it happens is hyperplasia to dysplasia to carcinoma. Why would that happen? If you don't get rid of the prolonged estrogen. Management may involve progestin therapy to oppose estrogen. So in short, dysplasia is difficult structure progresses to disaster, all right? Like the neighborhood we talked about, what is dysplasia? It means abnormal growth that could eventually turn into cancer, all right? Metaplasia, however, means changing one type of cell into another. For example, squamous cell turning into columnar cell with Barrett's esophagus. Additionally, there is increasing risk for progression in cancer. This is your biggest takeaway. The step-by-step process that starts with abnormal cells like dysplasia or metaplasia, which can develop into full-blown cancer if not caught earlier. So with all of these, when it comes to dysplasia, focus on the cause and effect. Okay, so for example, HPV causes CIN, which leads to cervical cancer. All right, GERD, acid from the stomach, causes Barrett's esophagus, which can lead to esophageal cancer. Unopposed estrogen causes endometrial hyperplasia, leading to endometrial cancer. The key here is to get rid of the cause. If you can find the cause, you can get rid of the dysplasia. So now let's just go ahead and jump right into our questions here. I'm going to go ahead and give you some time. Remember, when it comes to these questions, start with the end, the last sentence, not at the beginning. Start at the end, then read your answers, then go over everything. This will give you a firm foundation, and if you can get into this habit, it will help you significantly on USMLE. All right, go for it. All right, so if you chose B, CIN progresses from normal epithelium to dysplasia and can eventually lead to carcinoma if untreated. Remember, this is something we've talked about. CIN progresses through stages from mild dysplasia, CIN1, to severe dysplasia, CIN3, potentially leading to invasive carcinoma if untreated. What are the high-yield HPV variants that we talked about? HPV 16, but also don't forget HPV 18, all right? Now, there are the primary risk, the strains and E6 and E7 oncoproteins inactivating tumor suppressors like P53 and RB. This promotes carcinogenesis. All right, let's go on to the next question. Okay, the correct answer was B. The condition is a precursor to esophageal adenocarcinoma if dysplasia develops. Remember, chronic GERD leads to Barrett's esophagus, where the esophageal squamous epithelium changes to columnar epithelium, or also known as metaplasia. If the stomach acid persists, it can lead to dysplasia and eventually esophageal adenocarcinoma. All right, one more question for you before we conclude this video. Okay, if you chose B, I hit you with the triple whammy B this time. I want to keep you on your toes. Basically, the correct answer is B. The condition can progress to endometrial carcinoma. So why is this? Remember, we talked about this. Unopposed estrogen, as seen in conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome and obesity, leads to endometrial hyperplasia. If untreated, this hyperplasia can progress to dysplasia and eventually endometrial carcinoma, especially in postmenopausal women. Treatment often involves progestin therapy and to balance your estrogen. Okay, thank you guys for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to visit thehealingpowerofnature.com for top tier study materials, including our complete pathology book designed to make passing USMLE Step 1 easy breezy. Your support means everything to us. Head over to our Patreon to help us keep these videos coming and also unlock content like bonus materials, practice questions, and more. Together, we can make your journey to becoming a doctor smoother and more successful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video with your fellow future doctors. Until next time, happy studying, and remember, the power to succeed is already within you.